Welcome, everyone. I'm seeing some names pop in here. I'm welcoming you to the room. For those who are here, I would imagine, as you can see from the screen I've shared, you're here for the Compassionate Conversations workshop, where we're going to talk about how to respond with sensitivity when listening to individuals disclose stories, or maybe not even specific stories, but of violence and abuse within the beauty industry, within your profession. I'll give people opportunity to share a bit so that there's a bit of back and forth with the larger crowd. As we know, with the realities of the situation right now with COVID, we're all inside because my workshop space, this is my classroom. At this point, you may not know this, but I teach in the room I'm in. I'm an adult educator um, who have knowledge and expertise in the area of having these types of conversations. So maybe I could introduce myself now and we could get started. As stated on the screen above, my name is Dale Gruchy. I'm a consultant. It's an interesting word. What it really means is I know a bit about the topic. And by that I mean is, Rhonda Fraser, which some people may or may not know, who works in the intimate partner violence, domestic violence world, last year came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in maybe offering this workshop. And she asked me because I've been doing workshops in this area for the last 5 years in the area of trauma-informed practice. I started with the Department of Health and Wellness, and I've done a number of projects. And at this point, I've offered a couple of dozen workshops in this area for different professions, because often when we start talking about these conversations, often people think that you have to be advanced training. All right. One of the things I've done in the last 5 years is I've offered opportunities for people working in all kinds of professions, so that the very thing that's said here is how to have those conversations. Each of you who are signed up, because that is indeed what it is you want to be able to do. So today, and in our workshop, you'll probably recognize this, that we're going to talk about what our current practices are, and also for you guys to think about, what do you currently do? Because, one of the things I would really encourage you right now to consider is that this is not all new knowledge. Now, in the little while, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of exercises to help you to recognize and see within yourself how you've been having those conversations or how you work. So today we'll reflect on that, along with me offering some ideas on how to be a little more trauma sensitive, along with for you guys to think about, how does this fit in with your profession and within the boundaries of who you are. All right. And I always like to start my workshops there, so that folks, that we're all on the same page, so that we understand. Now, having said that, of course, we got a few housekeeping pieces of information that I just want to mention to you. First of all, I've introduced myself. I'm also on the planning committee, but I also want to recognize that something of this nature, this workshop now, and of course, I'm just going to mention this, and I know it'll be mentioned later. We're going to be taking some of the materials that we have here. We're going to be producing a short video and other materials that people can take in the beauty industry and use to enhance their own professional training, or for you folks who are here to be able to access more information and solidifying what we're doing today. So I have had the pleasure and the privilege of working with the women here, Joanne, Catherine, and Jordan. It's been phenomenal working with these women. Also, Jessica and Rhonda. I mentioned Rhonda's name earlier. Rhonda's with is an outreach worker currently in the with Juniper House, and Jess is our technical support person. And I'm going to ask Rhonda and Jessica to turn on their camera for a minute, just for a reason, because I don't know if you've noticed, or maybe some of you have or not, is that we have a chat function, and we're going to invite you sometimes to type in the chat. If you have a question, for example, I know that some of you might not want to turn on your cameras. And if that's the case, that's okay. All right, and ask. You can type it in the chat function, and Rhonda and Jess will let me know what the question is. They'll bring it up. And also, at another time, I might ask you, if you don't want to speak in the larger crowd, to type in the chat function, and then Rhonda and Jess will be the voice. Okay, so thumbs up. Okay, all right. So this is Jess and Rhonda. So thank you. I also want to talk to you guys about self-care while you're in this workshop or at home or at work, because, well, you guys may not be aware of this yet, but you're going to hear me say this a few times. But when we talked about being compassionate or trauma sensitive, you're going to hear me say these words a few times. A lot of it comes back to us, to me, making sure that we take care of ourselves. Because, even here, some of the stuff might, and I'll use the word trigger. That means when something in the environment happens and it brings up feelings. That's not unusual. Most of us experience that at some point. What's important is what you do with it. And this is also part of me as a provider, as a healthcare worker, as a beauty person, or working anywhere, is taking care of ourselves so we can do our job. So I put here, and in the top here, or in the side, depending on where it's showing up on your screen, are some numbers for you, just for you to remember. And they can be for you now or later, or even when you're working with folks, is that you can call 811 for medical support. 211 will actually give you resources in the community. There's a website for all that is intimate partner violence in the world. And for anyone, there's a mental health, there's a crisis line for anyone. So just there are resources. Also, I want to give you this, and I give this to all my students anytime I do any of this workshop, is to remind people that if you find yourself, and you might even use this with anyone in your world, and when you're finding that they're not quite there and that they've been triggered, is that a grounding exercise? 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 you smell, 1 you taste. That's just a grounding strategy, and it's not just about this workshop. You can find that can work for you whenever you need it. So, self-care, and in fact, colleagues, self-care is actually at the root of all of this, because you need to feel comfortable more with yourself as you do this work. And that's true for all of us. Okay. So, what I want to do is invite you to consider all of that. All right. The other thing is that I would like us to start here. Okay. And I've got to admit, I'm a little biased. I sort of start all my workshops in this area with this, where I'm going to ask you to think of a story. You're all professionals. Think of a story when you were at your best while supporting a client, supporting a person in your world. All right. When your work world, when you were really successful. All right. And I want you, and in a minute, we're going to send you off to small group work. And that small group, you're going to be gone for 10 minutes. Okay. And I want you to share that with each other. Share, what were you doing, and what were the qualities in that, what you were doing? So when you were at your best, supporting someone in your work world, what were you doing, and what qualities did you bring? And I want you to take a note of what those qualities are. When you come back, I'm going to ask people to either share it verbally or also to type it in the chat. But this is often a good place to start, because remember earlier I said we bring all this stuff with us? And it's all of you folks, hey, you're successful professionals, or you wouldn't be sitting here. So let's start there. So I'm going to ask my media mavens in a minute to invite you all to go to a room. You're going to be sent in there, and then it will automatically close in 10 minutes. If you want to, you can come back earlier. Remember when you go in there to turn on your sound so you can speak to each other, or turn on your visuals. All right. So I'm going to invite you guys to do that next. What were the qualities that you exude? What was it? Would anyone, you can either type it in and our media people will speak, or you can speak.
Compassion, listening.
Yeah. Listening.
Mm-hmm.
All of this, compassion, listening,
Empathy.
empathy, being able to hear. I bet you people are various versions of that, right? So
caring, being attentive.
Yeah.
Maintaining eye contact, showing empathy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The ability to provide privacy, listening, non-judgment. being present.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
all of these. Now, and I'm sure that there's a lot repeated in here. And even if you did not type something in, what I want you guys to do, and as we finish and we go and have our discussion in the next hour, I want you to remember these things, because often when you come to a training like this, you expect that things are going to be very different. When in fact, as we go through here, the content may not be what you're used to dealing with every day, but perhaps many of the things that we're going to be talking about here and I'm going to be presenting are not necessarily very different from what you're already doing, except with a little something rolled around in it. And by that, I mean a little more knowledge. So what I want us to do here at this point is to think about for yourself in terms, especially with the conversation we've just had, because it really sounds like from what Jess described, many of you already know a lot of this. And that's part of one of the things about becoming listening compassionately is sometimes giving yourself permission to know how much you already know and then roll around and ask yourself how you can push the edges of what you know. So what does it mean to listen compassionately, to listen with sensitivity? So when Jess read out the things that many of you have already said, I suspect that when you're at your best, you actually are trauma sensitive. You actually are uh, aware of how to be compassionate in your listening. But perhaps one of it, like I said, is to push a little further. And by that I mean is understanding that compassionate listening people um, is about how we hear. It's our communication. It's not necessarily only our words, it's our actions. It's how we stand with someone else and how we're listening to them. Trauma sensitive approach is about this. Compassionate listening is having a trauma sensitive conversation. It's about how we communicate with other people. It's about having those conversations with understanding this. And I'm going to lean in here and say this. This is not about doing counseling. And I put it this way because my years of teaching around this, and I said, I've given like dozens of workshops in different areas. Everyone seems to think you need advanced training to do this. That have this type of approach of listening compassionate, having a sensitivity around trauma, when in fact, no, you don't need advanced training. What you need is advanced sensitivity and compassion. All right. It's about giving yourself permission to listen to what's being said to you without requiring anyone to disclose to you. It's almost as if it's written above here, it's like a universal precaution. I'll do this with everyone. All right. And some of you, I suspect, already do. I mean, in my conversations with our amazing consultants, I have, and I'm not in the beauty industry, right? I'm an adult educator. I teach at the community college and the university here at Acadia, and I do workshops and such. And my background is, I did therapy, and I do a lot of stuff. Okay, but one of the things I've said, and I will repeat every time I do these workshops, is that we all have a role to play. This you do not need a PhD in clinical counseling psychology or bachelor's degree or advanced training with certification. What it is that we all have a role, a way we relate to people that's based on principles, and those principles, and many of you probably articulated it earlier, and when you talked about when you were at your best working with people, is that you're creating safety with the person. And I'm going to just say to you guys, you're probably doing it all the time and without necessarily knowing, because it's really nothing more intimate than going to someone in the beauty industry and having your hair done, your nails done, your skin, everything that you do. That's probably one of the most intimate acts that a person invites you to do. And you're creating safety. So you know how to do that in many ways. So it's about creating safety, promoting choice, and building skills. And by that I mean is that you don't have to fix anything. And it's up to the person that you're talking with who will decide what to do. You don't have to take any actions. All right. And I'll explain that in a moment. All right. So compassionate listening, again, is about having trauma sensitivity. It's about, and I've written it here. I love this statement. Compassionate listening is when we access our deepest wisdom to transform separation and conflict into opportunities of connection, healing, and peace. What that really means is this: I'm sitting with a person and I'm helping them get what they need and where they want to be. As one of my colleagues who is on here listening, and I heard her say it, and I've heard her say this more than once, is that one of the things about working in the beauty industry is that you create opportunities for the folks who come to see you to be able to see their internal beauty by seeing how they take care of themselves. You help people all of the time become more in touch with themselves. That's why people come to see you. So, really, in many ways, when we start talking about that, you've already been doing it. And think of the stories you share. All right. So, compassionate listening, and it's written here, it's a skill set, it's a process of reflective listening that we have. In other words, listening to what people are saying and then deciding what we're going to reflect back and what we want, what we feel that we want to. Okay, it's the gift we give to each other, to the person. In other words, really, from my perspective, a trauma informed approach, a trauma sensitive, compassionate listening is listening to the person and helping them access who they are. Now, having said that, when we start talking about when people are bringing in perhaps stories or evidence, because reality is very few people actually disclose um, these stories with us. We do it, we see it by what we see. But for us in our communication, these are the things that I offer you. And I suspect, again, many of you are doing this in different aspects, but when we start talking about intimate partner violence or abuse, we often think, oh my gosh, I've got to do something about this. Well, colleagues, you're not required to fix anything. It's like when we were having our discussions as a group, one of the things that came out in it with the amazing consultants we have was people actually getting permission to know that if you think something's happening, you don't necessarily have to fix it. One of the things for you guys to be aware of is that there's no mandatory reporting around this. You don't have to call and report someone to the police or call anyone, unless, of course, you're dealing with a minor child or an adult in need of protection. And if that's the case, that's a different thing. And a child in this province is someone under the age of 16. But having said that, um, uh, you that's not something that's done all you talk to each other when that happens. So coming back though, I want to make it clear to you is that there's not an automatic reporting requirement. What is required of us, and I've got it written here, is we need a great deal of patience. You know, when I talked about earlier about self-care, well, sometimes that's a big piece of this so that we can offer an empathic, caring, compassionate air with boundaries because of this, folks. You will only do what you feel that you need to do. It's not like you're compelled to take action. Perhaps you might remind yourself that sometimes the most sensitive, trauma sensitive, compassionate conversation you can have is by doing the work with the person that is sitting in front of you. By creating that relationship, you're allowing that person and providing that opportunity for that person to see the positive within themselves. Just something to think about. Or at least I know um, that that's an awful large part of what we do. So we use our empathic airs, boundaries, reflective listening. And by that I mean is let the person talk to you as opposed to you necessarily telling someone what to do. And be willing to offer information if it's wanted. Like, for example, saying to someone, I've got some ideas if you're interested, but only if you're interested. Okay. And the other piece here about this type of work is for you guys, and I guess self care comes down to this. If people are saying something that you feel uncomfortable with, it's best not to get defensive. In other words, people are saying it and you don't need to necessarily take it on. This is where self care becomes really a part. You can do and be the best person that you know you can be in every interaction with folks. All right. Because again, with trauma sensitivity and compassionate, what we want to do is to be there and listen to folks and do it with boundaries that helps people see that they're having a positive relationship with you and you respond in a way that supports that relationship. Okay. So first of all, here it's awareness. First of all, understanding how prevalent trauma is, because remember we're in the context of this workshop, we're talking about intimate partner violence and abuse. However, you guys, really, if we were in a larger course that I was giving, because I can do 1 day, 2 day, 6 week work presentations on trauma and various aspects, most people have experienced something. And I'm not saying that to trigger anyone in the group here, but I'm sure many of us, you understand that this is the case. Now, it comes out differently in every area, but it's not that we have to take action. Just know that why people respond sometimes in front of us a certain way, because stuff happens and they have responses. So it's not about something I've done. Okay. Or with trauma where it's safety and trustworthiness, I'm creating safety. And I think you're doing it by your jobs. Or think about the stories you shared when you were at your best and what that means. That's what this is. Or choice and control and collaboration. You're offering choices to the person. So if a person, and we know that something's happened, but they don't want to take action, it's not for us to force them. Perhaps the biggest thing we can do is person comes to us in your world is that the choice is what they're going to do and the control is over what they want to do, and I'm not going to force you, but I'm going to be here to provide the services I've been doing all along, and perhaps in time with that relationship, by how I have provided those services, how you have provided the services, that maybe when someone wants to do something different. All right. And of course, with the skills, we use positive languaging around the people that we're privileged to support and the privileged people who come to see us. Okay. So, one of the things with trauma awareness I want to talk about for a moment is, what does it look like when you have people who are coming to you in the beauty industry? What does sometimes domestic violence and abuse look like? So, our amazing consultants helped me with this and provided this, because each of our professions have a different way. But these are different things that sometimes you might see, because most people won't come out and tell you. All right. What you're going to see is things like when you put a cape on your client. I know when I get my hair done, they put a cape around me, and then sometimes you might notice bruising around the neck area. Or, one day, I'll just give you an example. For me, I went in and I had bruises all over my arms. My media mavens actually know I'm a nonviolent crisis intervention trainer. So I had a woman who was, you know, offering me amazing services with my hair, and all she did was look at me and say, "Oh, you have a lot of bruises." And I went, "Yeah," and left it at that. And then later on, I explained what was going on. So when you respond, you can reflect back, but don't necessarily expect that someone's going to respond to you. You open up a door if you feel comfortable. Okay. Or the next thing is, during a service, you notice there's very tender spots on the clients. The same thing. Oh, just that. But sometimes, just by acknowledging that you see it, it opens up a door to see if a conversation happens without you needing to think that one. And I used my example where I was doing nonviolent crisis intervention training, because it's not always necessarily mean that it's actually intimate partner violence. There can be other reasons this stuff happens, or so that folks might provide an explanation for that. Or maybe what you do by noticing is that later on when they come in, it'll provide more of an opening for a person. And maybe not just with you either, by the way, just so you know that this is a way all of us professionals, like depending on where people go and get services, that by you treating someone a certain way, by noticing but not necessarily requiring any type of feedback or anything, might give someone enough oomph in the next interaction to explain to someone, or to think about, well, maybe not everyone comes here with this. So just for you to remember, that's what I mean by building safety, offering choices, connecting with people, strength based. Oh, that's how we do this. So based on being aware that these things happen, then we respond in this way. Okay. Again, though, I'll ask you to go back and think about when you were at your best in the story you've shared. A lot of those qualities are the very things that I'm talking about here. So another one here is, I want my lashes done, but I don't want to look like they're done because my partner doesn't doesn't know, and stuff like that. And how you respond again, you know, even like maybe asking, What's that like for you? Only, of course, ask the questions if you feel comfortable, because the other piece of compassionate listening and sensitivity is to be not only sensitive to the person who you're privileged to support, but to yourself. You have to manage yourself, what you feel comfortable doing. And as long as you're calm, then you're providing a message to the person. But you don't have to ask anything. This is like if you don't feel comfortable, or you can. All right. The next part, again, I love to wear my makeup. My partner wouldn't like me to leave the house if I looked like that. Well, then you might ask a few questions like, well, what would you like to look like, or what direction? And I suspect that last one, you guys are probably more of experts at how you respond. So give yourself credit for the stuff that you've been doing already and the work that you do, because sometimes people don't do that. Other things here, and I mentioned this, I think, is that sometimes people don't necessarily tell us, but they become uh, withdrawn or quiet. And colleagues, many of you folks are amazing at what you do, which means people come back. So frequently when people do disclose, it's will be the people who you have been coming to back to see because you're phenomenal practitioners, right? They're regular people who come out and they might tell you, or they're regular people and there's been enough evidence and you have a relationship. It's like you've become you become friends. Maybe not friends that you're at home having pizza with, but people come in and they come every week, every 2 weeks for 10 years. You guys are important, right? So you notice all of this stuff and how people respond. So I want you to think about the things that we've talked about now, and I also want you to consider the stories you share, the qualities you bring, and how they mix together. All right, because I have a scenario now, and I want you to think about the things we've talked about, and I want you to reinforce the stuff we what and talk to each other. I've got a scenario here. And I want you guys, I'm going to send you in the small groups again for another 10 minutes. I want you to think about what we've talked about and the things I presented and what you would consider as standing out as significant in this and what you think would be helpful to do or say. Significant. What do you think that stood out to be helpful? What usually at this point, what we would do is if you were in the room with me, I'd have a larger group discussion about what were the pieces that you think were significant? What was the highlights of the conversation? I am aware that Jess does have a comment that someone has already put in.
We've had a couple of comments.
Okay, I figured as much.
You'll hear from both of us.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the first one is looking for some ideas or tips on clients who may overshare.
That sometimes happens with people who overshare. One of the things I would suggest that one of course that you don't necessarily ask any more questions, because that'd be the first thing, and the other thing is to um, depends on what they're oversharing, but you might, and I'm about to give suggestions to talk about other things or ask a question about what's the most important, that what they're asking. I need to know what they're oversharing about. But one of the things you can do is, because context is everything, is by not ask questions, not to encourage the conversation, or if it's something that you think you need to comment about, you can always say to someone, I don't need all the details of what you're sharing to still be able to assist you. And I know I'm not giving you really, whoever asked that question, you're probably wanting a flow chart. One doesn't exist for any conversation. But if you stay compassionate and kind, and what I'm suggesting here, that's usually a way that the oversharing will stop, along with saying, I don't really need to know all the details. And colleagues on the phone, did you hear how I said that? I said it with an inquisitive nature, not a 2x4. I don't really need to know all the details. I said it in a certain way that the person most likely won't get defensive with. Or sometimes if you know the person really well, sometimes you say, boy, you're sharing a lot with me right now. Again, did you hear my tone, volume, and cadence? Because it's not just the words, it's how I said it. Tone, volume, and cadence. Okay. Does that,
Okay.
Rhonda, do you have anything you want to add? Or
No, but we have a number of comments in the chat.
All right.
One suggestion is to set the expectation of your service time and ask your client what time works best for them. And always assuring that you can accommodate their schedule.
Oh, yes, that's that. And just so you know, that is compassionate listening, and it would definitely be trauma sensitive. Excellent. What other things?
We also see, in my industry, I have always believed we are in the service of giving. And I have noticed clients with sensitive situations need to feel like they are cared for a change. So offering to be accommodating shows you care about their circumstances. Absolutely, right?
And I suspect that was said by many people. Yeah. As a trauma-informed, knowledgeable person over here, I would give you 5 points for that, because you are providing a space for someone that might have all kinds of stuff happening to know that they're valuable.
Yeah. And also the next comment is a great point, which is to be able to assess the situation correctly. And is the client self-conscious in general versus abuse? And Dale, you touched on that a bit earlier. Mm-hmm. When you said, we don't need all of the details. And if people will talk to us when they're comfortable.
And they will, especially if they keep coming back and you're really kind. And my experience, and I'm only talking from my first voice here, is that the people that I have who I'm privileged to support me are the most kind-hearted individuals I've ever met. And
sorry.
Go ahead.
We also have the comment, I think maybe to be apologetic. So for example, maybe the practitioner is running behind and the person seems to be worried about time. And so that might be indicating that there might be something going on. And we've also had another comment more about oversharing. Folks who will overshare on a first-time visit. For example, we'll talk about abuse, mental health issues, etc., especially without an existing relationship. And sometimes that will happen suddenly and out of the blue.
And how about for you, and I'll go back to this, you don't have to fix it. How about just saying, my, that must be rough? Because in all of our professions, and I mean, even me who's done therapy with people at some point, people overshare. And if you're interested, it doesn't mean that something's happening right now. That's a typical trauma response of people who've experienced trauma in their past too, just so you know. All right. And for you, you're providing a space and you don't necessarily have to hear all those details, but just say that must be difficult. And you don't necessarily want to tell a person you don't want to hear it, but it must be difficult. Mm-hmm.
We also have a comment. You might want to see if they want a different look. If they're in a difficult situation and feeling badly about themselves, it might be difficult to know what you want. So maybe making suggestions would make the person feel supported and cared for.
Indeed. Or as happened one day when my hair wasn't quite the way it was, when the amazing person handed me a book and said, "Here, Dale, there's things you can look through. Which hairstyle do you like the best?"
And there's great support in the comments for what you said a few minutes ago, Dale, about it's not just what you say, but sometimes it's how you say it.
Listen, I come back to what my colleague said to me, that in the beauty world, you create an environment for people to feel good about themselves. Each of you who is listening to me here, know that that's what you do. That is what a trauma-sensitive, compassionate approach is. And again, you are not required to take action except to create that space for someone to figure out for themselves who they are without even necessarily having to do it directly.
Another great suggestion is, I think it's important if people need constant reassurance to not look at them in the mirror, but face to face and ask if they like it, what you've done for them.
And that was another 5 points, because what you're doing is you're affirming to them that they're a person. that they are being heard and that you're listening to them.
Yeah. And in the same vein, another comment that I find when clients overshare, I turn on my filter ears and listen and acknowledge their feelings. You don't have to give opinions or solutions, but I always found when people overshare, it's because they don't feel heard. Acknowledgement. And say things like, I can understand why you would feel that way. That must be tough. Simple statements that don't encourage sharing more if possible. And again, in the final comment we're seeing is, it's not so much your message as it is your delivery.
As I would say to my students now, 2 thumbs up. It is not necessarily the message you're giving, it's how you deliver it. And it's about, and I suspect that if you think about the stories you shared when you were at your best and you bring it into here, you're going to be quite successful. It's not necessarily the story, it's how you deliver it and it's the manner you deliver it. And this is why earlier I was talking a lot about self-care. You manage yourself, and then perhaps for some of us, when we're hearing stories, it's like we manage ourselves, and sometimes that fear we have that we have to respond in a certain way, you don't have to.
Dale, we have another comment.
Yes.
It's a comment, and I'm going to say a question.
Okay.
Someone else saying that they too make a point of turning to the actual person as opposed to only looking at them through the mirror. The question is, what are examples of self-care if you are triggered by the oversharing?
Okay, excellent question. Can I first of all suggest that we do 5 things we see in the room, 4 things we can touch, 3 things we can smell, 2 things we can hear, and 1 thing that we can taste. And for those of you who followed the first, I changed all the numbers there. What that does is, first of all, bring you back to the room to remember what you're doing. So that's triggering. And the next piece is to also remind yourself that you're separate from the situation and that you're here to provide a service. And of course, self-care, not just in the moment, but when you go home. Because listening to and being around other people's stories and being around other people's energy is hard. So in the moment, all of the trigger management that I had on that page, and then to figure out if it's something else that you might have to do. And by that I mean is, I'm leading in here. Boys, buddies, now my new Plan X coming out now, boys. You're all good at taking care of other people. How good are you taking care of yourself? I'm dramatic pause there, but I suspect that if you invite yourself to think about other self-care for yourself, you're going to find it easier to deal with the folks and become less triggered, because that's how it works. All right. Also to invite yourself to know that you're human, because you hear stories and the stuff that I put in, it's difficult to listen to it. So managing yourself and figuring out what you need to do so that you can continue to be that person that you've talked about in that first when I had you share your stories about when you were at your best. Okay. Were there any other things that popped up, Jess and Rhonda? No, you haven't come back on.
Yeah, let's come back on for a second.
Okay.
We've had someone who has commented that maybe folks just need someone to listen to them. So again, support for that.
Yeah.
Request about posting the 5 steps diagram again. Just to let folks know, you will be getting a copy of PowerPoint when we're finished this evening. And also just for clarification, it looks like when folks private message, it appears that they're going directly to Dale, but they aren't.
I'm not getting them.
No. And I'm not sure why it's showing it's going directly to Dale, but that's just so folks are clear.
I can't see them. If they are coming to me, I'm not able to see them right now. I want to point out something that you just said too, Rhonda, and for everyone here, is this: how I might respond might be a little different than Rhonda, and neither one of us are wrong. Because part of compassionate conversations, a trauma sensitive approach, is to figure out something that I feel comfortable doing while simultaneously supporting the person. And there's usually a multitude of correct right orderings, because in this sheet that I've just put out, it's about you guys figuring out a way to maintain a non-judgmental view of what you're seeing. You have to self-manage yourself while you're doing it, while simultaneously, you know, that the client has control over the conversation. However, it doesn't mean you can't say and respond to things by responding. That must be difficult. That's challenging. All right. And also to know that you may respond differently than the person who's in the chair next to you, and that's okay. All right. It's up to the person to take action, and it's up to you to feel comfortable while saying your words. And often when you present an approach where you are positive and affirming, um, it works best that way. All right. Of course, also here, remembering that folks have, just like someone asked, what do you do when you yourself are triggered? Same thing. Use the same grounding strategies that I suggested with them. If you feel, or just, instead of saying 4 things, you just, if you notice the person's going, well, it can be simple as this, is that, ask them about one of the products you're selling. I mean, that's really an easy one to remember. What one of the products? What do you see? See that over there? That's for that. What products do you use? Even that will bring them into the room. Okay, so that it's things that nature. And of course, embedded in all of this is taking care of yourself, because to have this approach we're suggesting, really, it's about staying calm and self-managing in the moment, and also, folks, taking care of yourself. Okay, taking care of yourself so that you can indeed take care of other people. That's how it works. And all the things that people have talked about. All right, there. Okay, so folks, I'm just going to go back here for a second. What I want you guys to do right now is to consider the stuff we've talked about. It is actually, wow, it's hard to believe, but it's 7:15.
And Dale, we've,
Yes.
we've had a couple of questions.
Oh, excellent. What are they?
I'm wondering if we might, instead of taking time for small group,
I think we will
if we
do what
could
you want.
answer the questions that are coming in.
We can.
Someone has asked if you could please expand a bit more on the idea of not responding, as mentioned earlier. And then there's another question as well. But if you want to.
Well, when I say not responding, when a person's self disclosing and over disclosing, is that you don't ask about it. And you don't necessarily reflect back and ask for the content of what is being offered. That I think one of the people in the line who you read about said that you comment about the feeling or the person as opposed to the actual events. So don't by saying to someone, "Oh, that must be hard or difficult," without asking, "Well, tell me more about that." Because often, if you concentrate on, "Well, what are some of the things that you did," instead of asking about the content, people don't talk about it as much. It tends to decrease that. That's what I'm. That's the thing I'm suggesting. All right. I'm not suggesting you just don't say anything. No. And if I suggested that, it wasn't what I meant. All right. Sometimes I know I say things and they're interpreted, but by concentrating on that as opposed to the content, decreases it.
I think that's satisfied as an answer.
Okay.
The next question is, what if there is a situation when you overhear a colleague perhaps not handling their client's sensitive situation well?
Oh, wow. You know what? We got that in every profession, including mine. I don't know if you want to handle it in front of the clients, but that definitely, it will, of course, it would, again, context is everything. But I think that's something you need a conversation with when not necessarily right in front of the person. Now, mind you, sometimes I have, depending on the thing, I've just called my colleague over and had a conversation with them, not in front of them. Because if you're noticing your colleague, for example, is getting triggered themselves, maybe if it's really significant, you want to just, if you can, depending on your shop, take them away for a moment Okay. But I know you're not going to want to do that very often, but definitely a conversation with them. Not necessarily in front of the person. I don't think I'd let it pass. And you can start that conversation with, hey, I noticed that you had this conversation. So it's hard not to hear, but I went to a workshop where there was some odds and sods. That's my Newfoundland conversation language coming. There were some things we heard that might be helpful. I don't know. Are you interested in in listening to me? And I don't know how, sometimes most of our colleagues will listen to us and some of them won't at that point. So um, that conversation not necessarily in front of the clients. However, sometimes depending on what it is, you might need to. I know that doesn't give you all the concrete answers. Rhonda, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. No, I don't have anything that I think I can add. I think you
Okay.
that question. Maybe,
Yes.
Dale, some thoughts on if someone feels that they could step in the moment and be helpful. So if my colleague maybe is struggling or not responding in a way that would be considered compassionate and trauma sensitive, is there anything that could be done in the moment?
Oh, I think that I would walk over and go, oh, I'm listening to, and again, tone, volume, and cadence, nice and calm. Just like you would talk to the woman, no, it's not just women, to your client, you might want to talk to your colleague and say, hey, I'm listening to the conversation here. Maybe there's a few things I can offer here. I'd walk over and stay calm and say, hey, I got some suggestions for you if you're interested and willing to listen to me. What do you think? And stay calm while you're doing it. All right, in the moment. Now, I'd like to tell you that that's going to be received well by everyone. Most of the professionals, it would be. But you know that if you stay calm and you offer, just like when you're working with the women, the same compassionate or the clients that you have, the same compassionate approach you would have with your clients, the same compassionate, caring, sensitive approach with your colleagues. Because remember, you can get a trauma response from yourself, a trauma response from the persons we're privileged to support, and our coworkers.
And
And
Dale, we have a question because I know you're going to be going to summary shortly.
mhm,
But a question for maybe some more clarification about at what point we as service providers are required to report to police or
yes,
authorities when a
yeah,
client confides. And of course, understanding if folks are under 16, but what if they are over that age? And then concern about how do you deal with possible backlash. So maybe just a bit more conversation about, because you said it earlier, Dale, and
I
I remember
did.
this a lot as well. A lot of folks find it hard to believe and to remember
I
that
know all my students are the same. Like
competent adults need no report.
20 years of teaching folks in the outreach program at the NSCC and the community and Acadia find it hard to believe when I tell them there's no mandatory reporting for domestic violence when a person's experiencing it because and I could go into all kinds of details, but only to tell you that there isn't. The only time there's a mandatory reporting is when you're dealing with a minor, and in this province, a minor is someone under the age of 16. And then you have to call Family and Children's Services. Or if a person is considered an adult, a vulnerable adult, if you believe the person is not able to make their own decisions, then you can call adult protection and report it. These are two different places. But in terms of reporting anything to police officers for us, it's not there. Even for me, who's I'm a qualified therapist, and I'm not required to report anything. I mean, I could go into a much longer, detailed discussion about imminent harm, and by that I mean is I really think right now, this very moment, this person's in danger. If they're sitting in your chair, chances are they're not. Okay?
Dale,
Yes.
one suggestion that I would make, because this we could talk for an entire hour.
I could do an entire workshop on this right now.
My suggestion would be in situations of domestic or sexual violence
Yes.
where it's a competent adult. So it's
Yes.
not adult protection, it's not child welfare.
Yes.
That you contact the local transition house in your area.
That's a brilliant idea.
You are concerned about someone else, you absolutely can call your local transition house.
And they'll help you.
Even say who you are. You can call and talk about what your concern is to determine whether a report is needed.
And also, I can tell you, you can also call Family and Children's Services and Adult Protection and do the same without providing your name or the name of the person. It's about collecting information, and they're more than willing. I was to have that conversation. In fact, I had supper a few days ago with a woman who was one of the adult protection workers, was telling me that she gets a number of these phone calls from people in the world asking, because we don't often know. However, again, I want to point out to you, the vast majority of people who come into our work worlds are not in that place where mandatory reporting is required. And having said that, like Rhonda said, and here, sometimes it's surprising to folks that that's not required. Having said that, I would invite you guys to think about how you can use that to your benefit, because if you're not required to report things, maybe you can sit there and not necessarily think about who you have to call, but how to talk to the person that's sitting in front of you. Yes, and I know most of us want this to stop, and we'd like to be able to take action and all things of that nature. However, it may be the biggest gift we can give to anyone who comes to us that we think this is happening is the gift we will give is this moment where we are attending to them and demonstrating to them that they're important, you see, which is a different type of gift we give. And perhaps that's one way to take that energy about, do I call the police or not, or do I report, and move that energy into that place. Sorry, my dog has just woken up and we've come into the world here. Apologize for that. Okay. So that's the thing that I would suggest to folks. Okay. Is there any other questions or anything? I know we're coming up on close to time.
No more questions in the chat, Dale.
All right. So one of the things I'm going to say as here for you guys, and I know our time is coming near because my alarm is going off here. Okay, is that I want you to think about, as we've been going through this, what pearls of wisdom you might offer to yourself. And now I was going to send you off in groups, but I'm not going to do that, obviously. But what I want you guys to do, and I've learned this working with adults doing adult education, is that you need to think about what are some of the things that you can use. What was the most useful that you can use? We're not going into small groups, but think to yourself, what can you use from our conversation, and what do you need to do from here? All right. So in summary, I've suggested here is that most people won't come out and tell you that this is happening to them. And even you have to remember that even if you think it's happening, it doesn't mean it does. Or as I say to my students, on average, this is what happens and we see, but no one person is an average person. We can see signs and symptoms and they mean many things. And just remember that. Remembering you're not required to ask questions or get disclosures, that part of this is to strengthen your connection by how you respond and by listening. And how we do that is, well, what I often talk about is presence. Now, you guys do this a lot where you bring yourself and your being to where you are and have that relationship, and this is not something you have to fix. Okay. Some of it here is some of the stuff you can say that must be difficult. Is there anything I can do to help you? I have some resources and numbers if you want them. It's your choice, that type of stuff. All right. So again, no mandatory reporting. Be aware of your community resources. If you don't know what they are, 211 will get you there. Or, I know that when we put information on the website, some of that will be there at this point. All right. So having said that, I want to thank everyone who showed up here today, because you came with a willingness to want to learn new things. And this is how we work together.